You ever get that feeling in your gut? Like something's just not quite right, but you can't put your finger on it. I used to think I was just being paranoid. You know, the kind of woman who overthinks everything, until one day my husband James gave me a reason to start paying attention. It wasn't a huge thing at first, just some small changes in his behavior. But then I found something I wasn't supposed to see. And suddenly all those little things started making sense. I had no choice but to confront him. But the way I did it, well, that's the part no one saw coming. If you think you know what happened next, trust me, you don't. Let me take you through it. Before we start, type 1 if you've ever dreamed of getting revenge but never got the chance. No judgment here. And hit that subscribe button. We don't let betrayal slide around here, not even from people who don't subscribe. Let's continue. My name's Emma, I'm 35, and I've always been the kind of woman who trusts her instincts. I guess you could say I've got a bit of a sixth sense when it comes to reading people, especially my husband, James. We've been married for 8 years, and on the surface, everything seemed perfect. He's charming, successful, and always the life of the party. We've got a nice house in the suburbs of Denver, a solid circle of friends, and 2 kids who are growing way too fast for my liking. But like everyone, we've had our moments. No marriage is without its little bumps. Still, I always felt like we were solid. That's what made the whole thing so bizarre. I'm not the type to jump to conclusions, and I've never been a jealous person, at least not in the way you might think. I've always trusted James. But when the cracks started to show, they were subtle, almost like little whispers in the back of my mind. And those whispers? Well, they got louder over time until I couldn't ignore them anymore. It all started with something so small, I almost brushed it off. James and I were sitting on the couch one evening, scrolling through our phones while the kids were asleep when I noticed it. His phone was face down, something he never did. Usually it would just sit there, wide open, like he didn't care if I saw his messages or emails. But that night, it was different. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe he was just being cautious, right? Then there were the late nights. It wasn't a lot, just a couple of times over the past few weeks. He'd tell me he was working late on a big project at the office. It sounded reasonable, but something felt off. The office? Really? On a Friday night? I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the little things started adding up. He'd come home tired, like he'd been running around, but wouldn't talk about what he'd been doing. Not that I pushed him to. We had a lot going on, life, kids, work, but I couldn't shake that nagging feeling in the back of my mind. And then, one evening, it happened. I found a text message on his phone, the kind of text message that made my stomach drop. I'll be honest, I didn't know what to do with that text. It wasn't like a full-on love letter, but it was definitely intimate. The kind of message you send when you're a little too comfortable with someone. I can't wait to see you again, I miss you already. Dinner soon. It was signed with just a first name, no last name, no details. I stared at it for what felt like an eternity. My mind raced, but I refused to jump to conclusions. I wasn't that type of woman, right? I mean, I trusted James. Still, something inside me couldn't let it go. The next morning, I found myself in a bit of a predicament. How do you bring this up without sounding like a complete lunatic? After all, he was my husband. Surely I could trust him. But the message, that was a curveball. So I did what any self-respecting, mildly suspicious wife would do. I waited for the right moment. And when it came, I decided to confront him, but in a casual, let's talk about it kind of way. It was Friday evening, and we were at our friend's place for a barbecue. James had been a bit quieter than usual, staring off into the distance like he had a million things on his mind. "Hey, babe, quick question," I said, my tone light but with a little edge. "Who's Jill?" James's head snapped up. "Jill. What, where'd you?" "I found the text, James," I interrupted, keeping it cool. "The one that says, 'Can't wait to see you again. You're working on a project, huh?'" His face went pale. "Emma, he opened his mouth but no words came out. "Go on," I pressed. "I'm all ears, I mean I love a good story." At that moment, our friend Lisa, who had been standing nearby with her drink, took a sip and raised an eyebrow. "What's going on, you two? I swear this is like the beginning of a soap opera," she said with a smirk, clearly amused by the tension. James turned to her, panic in his eyes. "It's not what you think, Emma, I swear. It's a surprise." "Oh, a surprise, really?" I crossed my arms. "For me, you mean to tell me you've been planning some big surprise without telling me? Because if I didn't find the text, I'd still be in the dark, huh?" At this point, James was trying to keep his cool, but the sweat on his forehead said otherwise. Lisa gave him a knowing look. "Surprise, huh? You sure it's not some secret affair you're hiding, James? I mean, if it is, I'm definitely getting popcorn for this. James shot her a glare, and I couldn't help but laugh. The absurdity of it all was almost too much. Yet the more I watched him squirm, the more I realized this wasn't just some random fling. There was something bigger going on here. I just needed him to tell me. When James finally confessed that he was planning a surprise trip, my first reaction was, of course, disbelief. I mean, I had been imagining all sorts of wild scenarios, from an affair to him being involved in some underground secret society. A trip, really, this was the big secret. I was trying to digest the fact that my husband, the man I trusted with everything, had been so secretive about something so simple. But the deeper I thought about it, the more confused I became. If this surprise trip was meant to be a grand gesture of love, why was it wrapped in so much secrecy? A trip, a surprise, I repeated more to myself than to James. And you think this is going to fix everything? James, looking almost like a child caught in the act, nodded rapidly. Yes, I swear, I've been planning this for months, just, you know. The surprise element. The surprise element? I interrupted, incredulous. It's a surprise because you've been acting like a secret agent every time your phone buzzes. A surprise because you're acting distant, like you've been keeping me in the dark on purpose. Oh, and let's not forget Jill, who I'm supposed to believe is a colleague. At that moment, our friend Lisa, who had been sipping wine and observing from a distance, couldn't hold back her amusement any longer. A surprise trip, huh? I mean, if it were me, I'd be a little more open about that surprise. But hey, what do I know? I shot her a glare, but she wasn't wrong. James's explanation sounded weak even to him. Look, it's not like that, James said again, voice more defensive now. It's just, I didn't want to spoil it. You've been so stressed lately, I thought a surprise getaway would help us reconnect. You know, do something fun for once. I felt a knot in my stomach. The thought that he was planning something for us was sweet in theory, but the execution, a mess. So, the plan was to hide it all from me until the last minute. Just drop it on me out of nowhere. Well, yes, James said sheepishly, but I thought you'd love it once you knew, a little excitement. A little excitement, I echoed, the sarcasm pouring out of me. You know, a little honesty would have been exciting too, James. Or how about a little communication? You know, instead of dodging my questions and making me feel like I was losing my mind for thinking something was off. James sighed, rubbing his forehead. I'm sorry, Emma, I didn't mean to hurt you. I just got caught up in the planning. Well, you sure got caught up in a whole lot of nothing, I muttered, barely able to control my frustration. I couldn't even decide if I was mad at him or just mad at myself for not seeing it sooner. Next time, James, I said, voice slightly quieter but still pointed, don't hide things from me. We're in this together, okay? Lisa, ever the observer, chimed in again. You know, if this trip is really an anniversary surprise, I expect a beach in the Bahamas. None of this surprise at a cabin nonsense. James shot her a glance, but I was too caught up in my thoughts to care. I still felt hurt, but the more I listened to him, the more I realized he was just a man trying to do something nice in a terrible way. Maybe it wasn't the worst thing in the world, but how he went about it had clearly crossed a line. And now I had to decide. Was I ready to forgive him, or would this little fiasco be the one thing that truly tested our relationship? ChatGPT Danoi. As James stumbled over his words trying to explain away the surprise trip, I could feel the knot in my stomach tightening. I wanted to believe him, I really did. The idea of a romantic getaway, a break from the daily grind, was appealing, if only it hadn't been wrapped in so much secrecy and confusion. It felt like I was piecing together a puzzle where none of the pieces seemed to fit. Despite James's reassurances, the lingering questions wouldn't leave my mind. I spent the next few days in a haze, half-heartedly listening to him talk about the plans for the trip. He'd mention a few vague details, something about booking flights, researching destinations, but there was always a little too much hesitation in his voice. It didn't help that I noticed the same pattern repeating itself. Late nights, him glancing at his phone with a weird urgency, a general sense that something was off. It wasn't just the trip anymore, it was everything around it. The mood felt strange, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being kept at arm's length. Then came the moment that pushed me over the edge. We were at a barbecue at our friend's house a few days later, and I was trying to act normal. The whole ordeal felt like a bad dream, but I forced myself to smile, trying to put on a brave face. We were gathered around the backyard, the grill sizzling, everyone chatting and laughing. But beneath it all, I couldn't stop thinking about James's weird behavior. He was laughing with our friend Tom, throwing a few playful jabs about football, but there was something about the way he was acting that felt so different, like he was hiding something and I wasn't supposed to know. At some point, James slipped away from the group, talking about needing to take care of some work calls. And like a reflex, I felt that same itch of suspicion creep back into my chest. I told myself to stop overthinking it. After all, we had kids, jobs, life to manage. But then my mind circled back to that one detail, the text message. I couldn't stop thinking about it, the text from Jill. Who was she? What had he meant by dinner soon? Maybe I was just paranoid, but I couldn't help feeling like I was missing something. So, against my better judgment, I decided to do what any wife with a sinking feeling would do. I grabbed James's phone. It was the worst decision and the best decision all at once. The screen was still locked, but I had the code. It wasn't like I was snooping behind his back. I was just trying to make sense of everything that had been happening. With a quick swipe, I unlocked it and went straight to his messages. My heart pounded in my chest as I scrolled through, looking for any trace of the mysterious Jill. But what I found wasn't what I expected. There were a few texts from her, nothing explicit, but there was a certain level of intimacy. The kind of thing you'd expect from two people who were more than friends. I froze. I needed to think. I needed to breathe. I didn't know what to make of it, but I couldn't ignore it. The barbecue raged on in the background, people laughing, talking, completely oblivious to the storm brewing inside of me. I found James a few minutes later, back in the yard, chatting with Emma, one of our longtime friends. His face lit up as she made a joke about her kids. He was always good at turning on the charm. But when his eyes met mine, there was something there, a flicker of uncertainty, like he knew something was about to hit the fan. I didn't want to confront him there, not in front of everyone. It wasn't the place and it wasn't the time. But as we went on with the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was standing on the edge of something huge. I had the pieces, but they didn't fit. Something was wrong. I could feel it in the air, like static before a storm. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. The whispers in my head were deafening, and I knew I had to act. James needed to explain himself, now. I walked up to him, the words already forming in my head when I overheard a conversation. It wasn't intentional, but it stopped me in my tracks. James was talking to Alex, his old college buddy, about a secret project he was working on, something that wasn't ready to be revealed yet. I could hear the excitement in his voice, but there was also a level of nervousness. It was the kind of conversation that made my stomach flip, the kind that made me realize, whatever James was up to, it was more than just a trip. He wasn't just planning something for me, he was planning something. I stood there, frozen, trying to piece together the words that had just reached my ears. A secret project, what did that even mean? Was this part of the trip? Or was it something else entirely? As soon as the conversation ended, I approached James, my mind racing. A secret project? I asked, my voice tight. He looked at me a bit startled, clearly caught off guard. He cleared his throat and tried to cover it up. Yeah, just work stuff, nothing for you to worry about. But I knew better, I could tell there was more. This wasn't just about a surprise getaway anymore. It was bigger than that. He was keeping something from me, and I didn't know how much more I could take. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and now they were growing into something I couldn't ignore. James wasn't just hiding a trip from me. He was hiding something else. I tried to ignore the pit in my stomach. I really did. But as the days passed after that barbecue, it became harder to push the gnawing feeling aside. James's odd behavior, the late nights, the evasiveness about his secret project, nothing about it felt right. It wasn't just the trip anymore. There was something deeper at play here, and I couldn't shake the nagging suspicion that I was missing something huge. I spent the next few days wrestling with myself. Part of me wanted to trust James. After all, he'd always been open with me about everything, until now. But the other part, the one that had been quietly whispering in my ear ever since I saw the first text message from Jill, was growing louder. What if he's lying to me? What if there's something more going on that I don't know about? I had to confront him again. But this time I wasn't going to sit back and let him talk his way out of it. No more excuses. No more I'm planning a surprise or it's work-related. I needed the truth, and I needed it now. So when James came home late again one night, looking just a little too tired and a little too guilty, I decided it was time. He dropped his bag by the door, muttering something about being swamped with work. I could see the tension in his shoulders, his attempt to cover up the fact that he'd been avoiding me. I crossed my arms, standing in the doorway of the living room. We need to talk. James's eyes widened, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. He knew exactly where this was going. Emma, listen, No, James, you listen. I cut him off, my voice firm. I've been patient. I've given you time to explain, but now it's getting ridiculous. What's going on? What is all this secrecy? What's this project you keep talking about? He sighed, rubbing his forehead like the weight of the world was on his shoulders. Emma, I'm trying to get this surprise trip together. It's all been a little more complicated than I thought. There's no project, it's just been a lot. I could feel the frustration bubbling up. A lot of what? Why has it been so complicated that you can't even mention it to me? Why do you keep acting like everything's a big secret? You're my husband, James. I don't deserve to feel like I'm being shut out. James looked up at me, and for a moment I saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. I never meant to hurt you, Emma. It's just, I didn't want to mess it up. I thought if I kept it a surprise, it would be perfect. But now I'm making everything worse, aren't I? I wanted to believe him, I did. But every time he said something, it sounded more like an excuse. I was tired of the half-truths, tired of the secrecy. I needed more than empty promises. I needed to know if I could trust him again. So, what's this trip? Where are we going? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. James hesitated. I could see him weighing his options, trying to figure out if telling me the truth was worth the risk. It's a surprise anniversary trip, he finally admitted. But I didn't want you to know yet. I wanted to surprise you, make it something special. At this, I felt a small wave of relief. It wasn't an affair. It wasn't some huge secret he'd been keeping from me, but it didn't change the fact that he'd been hiding it, lying by omission, and that stung just as much. I see, I said, my voice cool. So all of this, all the secrecy. It was because you wanted to make it perfect. Yes, James said a little too eagerly. Exactly, I just thought you'd appreciate the surprise more if you didn't know about it beforehand. I ran my fingers through my hair, trying to make sense of everything. James, I don't care about the surprise. I care about the fact that you've been avoiding me, dodging my questions, making me feel like I don't matter. That's what hurts. I'm sorry, James said, his voice softening. I didn't want to hurt you, I thought I was doing the right thing. You're doing the wrong thing, I said, shaking my head. Hiding things from me is never the right thing. It's not about the trip, James, it's about the trust. You've been acting like I'm some kind of fool, and I don't deserve that. The room was heavy with silence, and I could feel the weight of the words I had just spoken hanging in the air between us. James opened his mouth to say something but stopped. He knew I was right. There was no easy way out of this. I'm sorry, James repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. I've been so focused on the trip that I lost sight of what really matters. I nodded, feeling a mix of sadness and exhaustion wash over me. We've got to be honest with each other, James. If we're going to make this work, we have to trust each other. No more secrets, no more lies, we're in this together, all of it. The good, the bad, the ugly. James looked at me, and for the first time in days, I saw a glimmer of the man I married. You're right, he said quietly, no more secrets. I thought I had it all figured out. After James finally admitted to the surprise anniversary trip, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The tension was starting to fade, and I was ready to move forward. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to get back to normal, to let go of the hurt and disappointment that had clouded everything. But there was still that nagging voice in the back of my head, the one that whispered, what if there's more? It wasn't even the trip itself that bothered me anymore. It wasn't even the secrecy surrounding it. What unsettled me was the way James was acting. His whole demeanor had shifted, and it was like there was something he wasn't telling me. He was apologizing, yes, but it didn't feel genuine. It felt like he was hiding something, and the more he tried to assure me that everything was fine, the more I felt like I was missing a piece of the puzzle. I tried to ignore it. I really did. The days leading up to the trip felt like a roller coaster of emotions. James was trying hard to make up for his past mistakes, being more affectionate than usual, planning every detail of the trip, but the unease in my gut wouldn't go away. I couldn't help it. I kept looking for something, anything that would prove my suspicion wrong. Then, the plot twist hit me like a freight train. I wasn't expecting it at all. It happened a few days before we were supposed to leave for the trip. James was in the kitchen, packing some last-minute things for the trip, while I was upstairs sorting through the laundry. I could hear him humming to himself in a good mood, almost too good. It felt like he was overcompensating. That's when I heard it, his phone vibrating against the kitchen counter. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but something about the way it buzzed caught my attention. It was a strange, almost rhythmic sound, like a deliberate pattern. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I was probably being paranoid, but I couldn't stop myself. I walked down the stairs slowly, trying to be as quiet as possible. I was so close to the kitchen now, the phone still vibrating, that I could almost hear the ringtone faintly. As I peered around the corner, I caught a glimpse of the screen. My heart dropped when I saw the name that flashed across it. It was Jill. Jill, my mind reeled. I had seen the text from her before, but this was different. The message on the screen wasn't just casual, it was urgent. "I'm really looking forward to seeing you again soon. Don't keep me waiting too long," it read. I stood there frozen, my blood running cold. My mind raced and I fought the urge to scream. This wasn't just a little surprise trip anymore. There was something much deeper, much darker that I hadn't seen before. I watched as James walked past his phone, oblivious to the fact that I had seen the message. My first instinct was to confront him, to walk into that kitchen and demand answers right then and there. But I stopped myself. I needed to be sure. If I walked in there now, I might give him the chance to talk his way out of it again. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me anymore. I waited until he went upstairs to grab something else for the trip. I rushed into the kitchen, grabbing his phone off the counter before I could second-guess myself. The screen was still unlocked. I didn't waste a second. The messages I found were even worse than I imagined. There were more texts from Jill. Flirty, intimate, and not at all appropriate for a married man. "I can't stop thinking about you," one of them read. "I'm counting down the days until we can be alone together again." My heart shattered. This wasn't some innocent surprise or innocent mistake. James had been seeing someone else. He was having an affair. I felt the room spin. My hands were shaking as I held the phone, the weight of the betrayal sinking in. This wasn't just about the trip anymore. It wasn't just about his secrecy. James had lied to me. He had been lying to me for months. I heard him coming down the stairs, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. Panic surged through me. What was I going to do? How was I going to confront him about this? I couldn't just pretend I hadn't seen the messages, but I didn't know how to break it to him that I had uncovered his lie. I took a deep breath and shoved the phone back onto the counter, trying to steady myself. The truth was right in front of me, but I couldn't let it consume me. Not yet. When James entered the kitchen, he looked up at me, his expression unreadable. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You okay?" he asked casually. I nodded, but inside I was anything but okay. My mind was spinning, the reality of what I had just discovered weighing down on me. I had to confront him. But how could I even begin to break this all down? "James," I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound calm. "We need to talk." His smile faltered. He must have sensed the change in my tone. "What's wrong?" I took a deep breath. "Who is Jill?" I asked, looking him directly in the eye. The silence in the room stretched on, thick and suffocating. I could see the color drain from his face as he processed the question. He knew the jig was up. The moment I asked about Jill, the room seemed to freeze. James's face went pale, and for the first time in days I saw genuine fear in his eyes. I knew then that everything was about to change. There was no more pretending, no more excuses. The truth was staring us both in the face. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. I didn't give him the chance to hide behind another lie. "I saw the messages, James, all of them. You've been lying to me about her, about everything." James's shoulders slumped, and he let out a heavy sigh, his eyes searching mine like he was looking for a way out. "Emma, I never meant for you to find out this way," he said quietly, his voice shaking. "I never wanted to hurt you. I wanted to scream, to throw everything in sight, but I didn't. I couldn't, not yet." Instead, I stood there, feeling my heart shatter with each word he said. "So, all the secrecy, the late nights, the texts, they weren't just about a surprise trip, were they?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. James's face twisted with guilt, and he looked like he might crumble under the weight of his own shame. "No, Emma, I made a huge mistake. I didn't know how to fix it. I thought if I could keep you distracted with the trip, maybe I could keep you from seeing the truth. But I should have told you. I should have been honest from the start." Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "You should have," I whispered, "because now, everything's different. I don't know how to look at you the same way anymore." The silence that followed James's confession was suffocating. I didn't know what to say, or if there was even anything left to say. My mind was spinning, my heart was heavy, and everything I thought I knew about our marriage seemed to crumble in front of me. He stood there, a man broken by his own lies, waiting for some sort of forgiveness. But how could I give that to him right now? I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I don't know what to do with this, James. I don't know if I can just forget what you've done." The words felt like a punch to both of us, but they were the truth. His betrayal wasn't something I could just wave away with a few apologies. "I don't expect you to forgive me right now," James said, his voice filled with regret. I need you to know how sorry I am. I was stupid, I was selfish. And I love you, Emma, I've always loved you. I don't want to lose you." His words felt like a lifeline thrown to me in a storm, but I wasn't sure if I could reach for it. I was still angry, still hurt, and unsure of where to go from here. "I need time, James. Time to figure out if I can trust you again. Time to figure out if we can fix this." James nodded, his eyes full of pleading. "I'll give you all the time you need. I'll prove to you that I can be the man you deserve. I'll do whatever it takes." It was a start, a small one, but it was enough to let me breathe again. I wasn't ready to forgive him, not yet, but I wasn't ready to give up either. Maybe we could rebuild, maybe we couldn't. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like we had a chance. In the days that followed, things weren't easy. James and I barely spoke for the first few days after his confession. He gave me space as I asked, and I spent my time trying to process everything. I couldn't just brush it off. The betrayal still hurt, gnawed at me like a constant ache in the back of my mind. I spent more time with myself than I had in years, reflecting on who I was, what I wanted, and where I wanted to go from here. It wasn't about revenge or getting back at James. It was about me. About finding a way to move forward, whether with him or without him. A week later, we sat down for the first time, really talking. No more excuses, just the raw truth. James apologized again, and while the sting was still there, I could see how deeply sorry he was. It wasn't enough to undo what had happened, but it was enough to show me that he was willing to try. I realized then that rebuilding trust wasn't a straight line. It would take time, it would take work. But the possibility of it, that we could find our way back to something real, was worth holding onto. So we made the decision to move forward one step at a time. There were still rough days ahead, no doubt, but at least we were no longer hiding from the truth. And that, after everything, felt like a place to start over. As I watched James pack his bags for the trip, I smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because for the first time in a long time, we were both honest about where we were and where we hoped to go.